I'm Sawyer, and you're listening to Our House A to Z.
Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Hey, listen, if you are newer to the podcast, you might not know that we take
requests. Yeah.
Not like song requests, not like Sunday morning worship requests, even though we've been known to do that once or twice.
Or like love questions like Delilah.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Love requests.
We take a lot of love requests.
Can you spin a special song out to a special someone?
Well, when I say we take requests, if you have questions or topics, things you'd like to hear more conversation on, you can shoot them over to us. info@hpc.church. Just put in the subject line, Our House Podcast, and shoot them over. We're always looking for fun things to talk about, things that are relevant to you, things that you feel like would be helpful in your journey.
It's good.
Yeah, shoot them over.
Yeah, that'll be fun. And we've gotten some really good ones over the years that we've been doing this. We've gotten some really good ones, yeah.
We've gotten some really good ones. We've gotten some scary ones.
We've gotten some regulars.
Yeah.
There's a few regulars. So, but anyway, yeah, we, because, if you weren't here back at the beginning or you haven't listened from the beginning, Our House A to Z was born out of the COVID quarantine when we couldn't have conversations with people, or at least face-to-face conversations with people. And so we really didn't want, I feel like maybe a little bit of the pastor's heart in us was like, okay, we want to still engage with people on stuff that we feel like is really important, stuff that like people are going through every day. And so, and I know that it's really hard to find things that are applicable to every single person every single week. And so for those of you that, maybe you're single and you've listened to a lot of podcasts about being married, or maybe you're married and you listen to podcasts about dating. Yeah. Thank you for bearing with us because you're part of the Our House family, but it is just meant to be, hey, like, let's talk about this. Like, what are you going through?
Right.
Like, what do you have questions about that you want to bounce off some people?
Right.
And that's kind of what this thing comes down to.
Right. Like, what are you going through, Zach? I mean, by the sound of your voice, you're going through something. And I think this is a good place for you to talk about what you're going through. I
mean, I've probably been screaming at my wife too much.
It's probably what's going on. Which is a great leeway into our
segue, maybe.
So not leeway. Segue. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not good with words.
You're great with words.
That's why they don't put me in front of people.
Babe, when you look as good as you do, you don't have to be good with words.
I am surely not good at words.
You make up for it with hotness.
But here's the thing. We are in the middle of a busy week. It's still actually not even the middle. It's just early on.
Yeah.
And
because we're recording this Tuesday morning.
We're recording it Tuesday morning. We had 2 incredible worship services Sunday morning. Then Sunday night, we went out to Smith Mills Camp out in Dartmouth and led worship there. We did an altar call, and then you kind of did an after party too that went on and on and on.
An after party, yeah.
Which I'd like to blame for the place that you lost your voice.
Okay.
I feel like before that you were doing well, and then
I would be willing to deny.
Do you want me
that.
to? I actually have like a small.
But I would be denying it, except that you have video footage that you're entering into evidence. So at this point, I think I'm just going to let it go.
I think that was the moment.
That was a lot of fun.
I think that was the moment, though, where your voice was like
cracked.
See ya.
Actually, it happened earlier in the.
Did it?
Yeah, because I remember.
I think mine cracked once or twice, and I couldn't hear it. But I was like, you can't actually hear it in this room. It's too loud. But when I was thinking about it, I knew Derek Tapina was part of this worship set.
Yeah.
And if you know, anytime Derek Tapina is part of a worship set that you're doing, he's recording like your individual vocal track and band track, like somewhere in that building. He has software where he's recording.
He's doing a multi-track recording, and it may never see the light of day.
It may never see the light of day.
Unless you royally screw up, and then it definitely will. Then he's definitely going to pull it out
time,
at the next Christmas party.
Yes, and every time, or like put it on the Slack for like the whole team to listen to like one really bad like lilt that you do.
Hey, I just want to run this by you guys. Let me know what you think. And it's like the one time in the last 12 years you like screwed up. Yeah. Like, thank you, Derek.
Or he like puts together this like mastered track and it like sounds so good, and you're like, oh, that's weird. I thought I was singing on that song. And you're like, he must have just dropped your track out because it didn't sound good. So he only
superimposed Frank Sinatra's voice
he
over.
He only includes the stuff that sounds good. And you're like, oh, so he actually like went note by note and took, okay.
Cut it out. Thank you.
It gives me a little anxiety, but it's fine.
No,
it's totally fine. Just give it your all.
It's fine.
Anyway.
And just note, at the end of the day, you can never trust the DePina brothers.
Oh, my gosh.
Just kidding.
Anyway, so we're leading there tonight.
They're the best.
Thursday night, Saturday night, Sunday night.
Yeah, so keep coming.
Hopefully Sunday morning we have something vocally to work with still.
Yeah, the theme of Smith Mills this week is churches coming together or something like that, and it's happening. I mean, it's a lot of churches out there. I think Pastor Tim had said like 20 different churches or something were represented, which is pretty cool to get together and just worship and hear a word and stuff. So that's a lot of fun. All right.
Anyway, so the topic at hand. Back to the comment about you screaming at me.
Yeah, which I've
obviously
never
was a
done
joke
in 15 years.
Hopefully everybody knows that that's not real.
I've never screamed at Ashley.
And just like a commercial break for the topic, some people are raised in screaming households.
I was.
You were raised in a screaming household.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, you're not a screamer, which is interesting. Like, I mean, you do your random like outbursts, which like leave my nerves a little shot.
Yeah, I'll raise my voice at the kids if it's like they're not listening to you rebuke them calmly. Then it's like, then I get upset because they're not like responding to you.
Right.
And so then I'll like slam my hand on the center console.
Not the hand slam on the center console. That's
my favorite move.
And that is your favorite move.
I slam my hand on the center console and I said, knock it off.
And I get mad and
I will yell, knock it off.
Look out the window because that's what happens when I get mad. I have to like turn a little bit to the right in the passenger seat and look out the window because
if you're wondering,
am mad at you.
You're so disarming though. You don't like engage in a way that like feeds, the thing that the monster.
So do you think if I fed the monster, you would be a yeller?
I don't know.
I don't think so either.
I'm not really wired that way, but I have had serious like anger things in my past.
Were you ever a yeller, like a screamer?
No.
Okay.
I never had the voice for it.
Yeah. I don't think I did either. I think both my parents are not yellers. I mean, neither of my parents are yellers. Yeah. It's like I remember my dad raising his voice like exactly like when we would be disrespectful to my mom.
Yeah. And you level up.
Mm-hmm. But it's like my mom was not a yeller. I think my mom can't yell. Mm. Like even when she tries to, it's like a quiet sound.
I know.
And you're like, oh, I feel bad.
It's like she yells and it just sounds like a fairy godmother asking for more ribbon.
You're like, say it a little louder.
Pass the ribbon. I'm not done with this fringe.
So she wasn't really a yeller, and I'm not a yeller. I mean...
Yeah, I think a lot of it is genetics. I think I've talked to folks with, Latina backgrounds and things, and they don't consider sometimes the communication or conflict resolution in their house to be anything out of the ordinary, but to someone else it would be considered domestic violence and the cops would be called.
It's so true.
So it's definitely, some of it's in the eye of the beholder. I know of households where everyone speaks like 10 or 12 decibels louder than they do in ours. Mm-hmm. Like we don't have a loud house, period.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember when our kids were little and they were responding like erratically to like loud sounds and voices. They're like, get me out of here.
I know. There was one time, I can't remember if I talked about this on the podcast before, but I turned the TV on and no sound was coming out and I was trying to put on Thomas the Train. Do you remember this? Yes. I was trying to put on Thomas the Train and I was like, somehow the volume ended up like full throttle.
They're 2, they're 4, they're 6, they're 8.
It finally kicked on.
Shunting trucks and hauling freight. It sounded like a screamo version
Sawyer
of the
was
song.
probably 18 months old. The kid
he went berserk.
He went berserk. He was so traumatized.
He never wanted to.
By that, you could not put Thomas the Train on for so long because he was so freaked out by the song because of that one incident.
To this
They're like
day,
really oddly
to
sensitive.
This day, he won't go in that Thomas the Train drawer.
I think I also damaged his ears at that point because now, ever since then, he talks really loud. His like voice is louder than everybody else's.
Ears, but he has just like a louder box. He just a louder voice box.
He's
or
got
something.
a louder voice box, or he needs his ears checked.
He's a loud talker, but he's not a yeller.
No, he's not a yeller.
He's definitely not a yeller. So anyway, but anger takes on many faces, not just volume. Like for me,
totally.
For me, it was never a screaming thing. It was always like a breaking something, punching something.
Okay.
Or like slamming something down.
Like the center console.
Like that. But I mean like now it'll be like in the garage when nobody's around and then I'll be like, Lord, forgive me. Like I don't want to.
But what are you doing in there? What do you mean in the garage when nobody's around?
Like I can't find something or I.
So you throw something?
Or I like, if I like stub my toe or
yeah.
like.
Oh yeah. We don't know what happens when you stub your toe.
And there's probably, some language, some word that you won't hear in heaven that comes out at that point too. Something.
Can
like
you clarify the garage time though? So when you go out to the garage, do you have like a punching bag in there? Are you throwing wrenches?
No, I have thrown a wrench.
You have thrown a wrench?
I've thrown a wrench.
In the garage?
I've thrown everything.
Out of anger?
Why do you think the garage looks the way it does?
Have you ever thrown a golf club when you're mad golfing?
I don't know if I have. Yeah, I have.
Really?
Yeah, but
babe, I feel like
more jokingly though.
I don't know if we're ready to talk about this on this podcast. I feel like
you miss a
we
short.
have a lot farther to go.
If like you miss a short putt, I'll like chuck my putter.
I mean, chuck it or just like toss it down to the ground.
I played golf with someone who will remain unnamed, but it was one of my two brother-in-laws. I'll let you do the math. And we were playing Mingo's.
One is a very peaceful hippie.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably. It must have been him.
Yeah, it must have been him. We were. No, but he's funny playing golf too. We were playing in Mingo Springs up in Maine, and oh my gosh, like John broke his 7-iron on the ground and then chucked it, and then went back into this meadow of high grass to look for the head because he didn't want to leave it there. It was awesome. It was honestly one of those things that
again, it broke him because he didn't hit the ball so hard. He broke him because he was mad. And
no, he slammed it on the ground.
Slammed the ground.
But I'm like, that's actually pretty impressive. Like you gotta,
that's some strength.
Yeah. So, no, I've never done that. I've never thrown anything in the pond. Guys will get mad and just chuck their stuff in the pond.
Oh, wow.
But I feel like, no, for me, it's more, I'm out there to have fun, so I'm not going to get that mad. When I'm working on something and I can't fix it, then I get really upset.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get something off and I break something else.
Right,
I'm like overexerting strength in one area and I end up damaging something else.
Yeah.
Then you're like,
right. So what do you think would be an example of, in the Bible when it says, like, when you're angry, like, not to sin in your anger?
Sure.
So I feel like sin comes in so many forms. Do you think that any, like, lashing out type behavior like that, would you say that's sinful? Would that be sinning in your anger?
I think it can be, yeah, I do. Because I think it's a manifestation of an emotion that you should have control over. So
okay.
I suppose, I guess I could say it this way. Anytime you're not in control, then you're not exemplifying a fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
I guess I feel it this way, like if you're giving control over to anger, then you're opening the door for a spiritual bondage.
Right.
Like bondage in anger.
Right.
And that's a slippery slope, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think if you like stub your toe and you like say a curse word or something that I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, that's it. Now you got to go through a cleansing process and, go see, whatever, go do some whatever. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I don't like the idea where we have safe spaces where we can act out.
Okay.
I think that is a very immature and ignorant thing for a believer to do, to say like, oh, I just go out to the woods and I like scream and like hit a tree,
right.
or like, oh, I've got to do this thing where I can just go break this thing and, nobody's around. It's like, well, somebody is around.
Yeah.
First of all, the enemy's around and he's wanting you to think that you're safe acting out in anger.
And you're feeding that.
Yeah. And so to me, that's the kind of thing like, all right, that's not doing you any favors.
Right. At the same time, like you said, I feel like self-discipline, self-control is such a huge part when it comes to like that end of anger, when it comes to like the physically acting out, or, hey, like this is when I say a curse word, like it just happens, like when I get hurt. It's all lack of self-control, no matter how you cut it. It's a habit. It's a bad habit.
Yeah.
It's just something you do and you're just like, oh, well, it's only because I got so hurt. No, it's not. It's because you've like allowed that to be a pattern in your life.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll speak to it like this way too. And if you were here for Pastor Scott's message, Scott Axman preached. He's the pastor over at Renaissance Church. And he preached here this last Sunday and did a phenomenal job. He's such a calm, like, voice too. It's so nice because I feel like we have so many not calm people around here. Our church is like one of the more like, we're like always erupting with something good, bad, or indifferent. But he was such a calm voice, and he was talking about the difference between, when Paul says, okay, not everything that's permissible is profitable. And to me, like that's such a good reality for believers, because we oftentimes just want the one line in the sand where it's like, well, it's either sin or it's not. And if it's not sin, then it's fine. Well, okay, so what about the things that aren't necessarily sinful, but they might be holding you back from a better life? They might be holding you back from a better walk. They may be holding you back from fruit of the Spirit. So if fruit of the Spirit is self-control, it doesn't necessarily mean that not always having self-control is particularly a sin, but what it does mean is that it's preventing you from what God wants for you.
Right.
It may be permissible, but it may not be profitable. Yeah, I'm going
That's
to mess
good.
those words up if I keep talking.
So a lot of times when it comes to anger, there's two extremes. You have the exploder, and then you have the like tea kettle one that's like a
Still an exploder, isn't it?
still exploder at
Just a
some
little-
point usually.
They're playing the long game.
They're playing the long game
Yeah.
where it's just like brewing under the surface all the time, and the stifler, they stuff it down.
Yeah. Which one would you say you are?
I don't think I'm either, to be honest. I don't really
You
like
just don't have an issue in this area.
in anger in general. I don't think so. Would you say I'm an angry person?
No, I wouldn't. But
Do you feel like when I get angry?
would you say I'm an angry person? Because I've
No,
had
I wouldn't.
anger. I've had anger stuff.
No,
Like,
you're not an angry person. You're not an angry person. I guess if I'm like mad about something, or if I'm angry at you,
Yeah,
I don't know if I'd stuff it. Usually I do take time. Like I'll definitely be quiet
yeah.
and not say anything for a while.
And that's my cue to like quickly change the subject and try to
And you definitely do that.
reroute you.
You're like all like
so,
loving and
how
try to
about-
bring up something that's really interesting
how
to
about-
me because
how
you know
about
I
the
could
socks this year.
no. You bring up something that's interesting to me to try to like get me to
did
talk
you
about
see
it.
That Dahlia farm we passed.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of
Usually
really
it
anything
goes
else
like
because I
this.
could pretty much ignore anything else.
What do you think about the ice cream barn tonight?
It's any of those
Any
things.
of those things. I know the way to your heart, babe.
Anyway, and I think I get quiet. I don't know if it's like to stifle it. I'm not a fighter. Like I don't really want to all of a sudden start engaging in like a big brawl.
Yeah.
I don't really like the idea of that.
Yeah. No.
I mean, will I go like head to head with you? Will we go toe to toe on something that I'm like passionate about? Yes. But I don't ever feel like it's really like rage, angry.
I feel like we agree on most things that you're passionate about. But I will say this. I think, and this is what I really want for our
But you got to tell me about the stuffers.
the stuffers. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? The ones that stuff it down?
Mm-hmm. What are the pros and cons of that?
Well, the pros and cons are that, you may not be reacting. I mean, reacting is sometimes like the biggest fail of somebody who struggles with anger because there's no measure. You're just literally reacting without processing, without thinking, without thinking of the other side, without talking, hearing another side of the story. You're just reacting. And
Right.
that, to me, like that's one of the biggest mistakes that we can make is to just react.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people feel like they don't have a choice but to react. It's like an instinct, but it's not actually an instinct. It's usually like a bondage. It's usually like some sort of hook that's in you. And it's part of our survival mode is to react. It's like, hey, quick, adrenaline, this, that, the other. And then something comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh my God, I said that. And now I've just learned to live with the fact that I say things I wish I hadn't, or I just live a life of regret.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, I would say there are pros and cons, but at the end of the day, we shouldn't be reacting.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to take the time
I
to
know. Anger
think it
really
through.
does come in like so many different ways. And I think you need to like self-evaluate. And as I always say, like self-reflect, like how do I process anger? And like I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about the last time I was like really upset. And I am I'm a recovering confrontation avoider.
Yeah.
And so my first go-to is like run. Get away from the situation. Like I have to retreat. Like if I'm upset about something with you, I usually will be like, I gotta go. Like I'm just gonna go outside and go work in the greenhouse, go do something else. If I'm at the church and I'm angry about something or upset, I'm like, I just need to get out of here. Like I need to like not be here. I need to go for a drive to like
Yeah.
be out of the circumstance and like take some deep breaths and pray. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right or wrong. It's like how I've just like learned how to handle being angry about something.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd call that a stuffer. I think a stuffer is somebody which we just kind of made up that word. I don't think that's like a clinical.
It's definitely not.
Clinical diagnosis, but a stuffer is to me somebody where the issue is not that you're angry about something. The issue is that you're never taking the time to resolve it.
I still think it's an issue to be angry about something and stuff it down because
But
what happens is that causes bitterness. Like, I think when we don't resolve it, like you're saying, that causes so much bitterness within us. And as much as like, as terrible a lot of times as the people who explode in anger, not for nothing, it usually passes faster because there's some sort of like expression of it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the people who bottle it up, hold it deeper, and it actually causes huge issues. It causes, I mean, it can cause health issues because we allow like bitterness, and it affects our bodies physically.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I just look at it like the folks who aren't responding or reacting right away. I think that their lack of ability to resolve or reconcile that issue, that becomes an issue in and of itself, because usually,
especially scripturally, because we're called to.
But the point is that it's not just anger. It's oftentimes they'll do it with other things. So if you're avoiding anger, you might be avoiding all emotional like release or manifestation or whatever, expression. So like, the same thing goes for somebody who, when you lose someone and there's a tragic loss, and you're not just avoiding anger at this point, you're avoiding grief. And so you'll do whatever you can. You're not just stuffing anger, you're stuffing whatever. You're stuffing any feelings. And so now you've become emotionally unavailable, sometimes to the people who you love the most in your life, your kids or your spouse or whoever. You've turned everything off. Not just anger. And at that point, sometimes your spouse is like, I would love to see you angry. I would love to see you blow up. Because at this point, just to know that there's like a person.
Let it out.
Yeah, just to know that there's a person in there somewhere would be great. So I think the problem is way bigger for stuffers because usually they're stuffing everything.
Yeah, right.
I think one thing I would want to point out in this topic too is just like some indicators. I think there may be people who are listening and you're like, yeah, this isn't really my gig. Like, I don't really have this. I want to say that I would have never acknowledged that I was dealing with anger until somebody called it out in me.
Okay.
And I remember where I was to this day, and I remember what it was about. It was during a really incredibly horrific season of my life. When we were in transition out of one church and starting this one, and just having gone through like something that I never in a million years could have in my wildest nightmares imagined, and I was angry, and like kind of like I'll say rightfully so. The problem is it doesn't matter how just your anger is. It doesn't matter how good your reason is. It will eat you alive.
Yeah.
And I was telling a brother sitting down at Starbucks in Seekonk, and I was telling him the story, like my version of the story. Finally, I was able to share with this guy who had heard everybody else's version. And you
felt like the soundtrack of Vindicated was playing in the background while you
I had Dashboard. I had Dashboard playing in the background. And no, it was probably more like Guns N' Roses, like Night Train, or something else that was a little heavier. Maybe some AC/DC Thunderstruck or something was playing in the background. And one of my walk-in songs, which, by the way, commercial break. Our boys, no one out there is safe. All right, I just want to tell you,
you're definitely not safe.
If we know you and you know us, our boys are laying in their bunk beds at night making up walk-in songs for you, and it is the funniest, singularly funniest thing that they have done collectively. The two of them. They come up with songs, and because they have a little Alexa in their room and can ask her to like play songs, hey, play, Brass Monkey by the Beastie Boys or whatever. It is so funny, the walk-in songs that they have for like every single person in our life. So anyway, yeah.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. So I am sitting there with, Metallica or something playing in the background in my head, and not that that's on Starbucks' soundtrack.
Definitely not.
But it was probably some like light jazz or like, some Ray Charles re-release or something. But I'm sitting there talking to a brother, and I am telling the story, and as I'm telling it, I'm feeling my heartbeat get faster. And I'm feeling like my blood pressure rise, and my voice is starting to change. And I can just I'm gripping the sides of the table with my hands. Maybe not quite, to the extent of like a scene from the Hulk or something. Oh. But it's like you feel this thing inside of you that you want to come out of your chair. And you're not even mad at the guy sitting across the table from you, but you're expressing anger to someone who you're not angry at. And this stuff is starting to kind of like express itself through your body, through your life, through your systems, your health, your voice, your whatever, your thinking. And he calls me out on it. He's like, hey, he said, Zach, some of you guys out there know the story. I've probably said it from the pulpit in years past, but he said, Zach, he said, this is all like real, everything you're going through. He was like, obviously being very sympathetic towards it, but he's like, let's talk about like what you really need to deal with. And because what I wanted to do was go deal with all of like my own like vendettas. And he's like, no, what you really need to deal with is the anger. And I'm looking at him like, what are you talking about? And because I would normally, I'd be somebody who would preach that from the pulpit and say, yeah, nobody should be like harboring anger against anybody and blah, blah, blah. But when it's in your own life, you're blind to it. And anger blinds us. Anger blinds us to itself. And so he's like, Zach, mark my words. He said, if you do not deal with the anger that you have right now, he said, it may be 5 months and it might be 5 years, but it will rear its ugly head and destroy everything you've ever loved. He said it just like that. And I was like, just sat back, and it was like, I was totally deflated. Not because he wasn't like validating my emotions, but because he was calling me out on the long-term repercussions of not really holding this stuff up before the Lord.
Right.
And so my short story with anger that I will just tell you and then pass the mic back to you, which we're not really passing mics because of COVID. So, we have 2 separate mics. Just kidding. But we all feed these things differently. And for me, where I was feeding my anger, if you can see it, I'm sure everybody's heard the old Chinese thing, like, there's two dogs in a cage. Which one lives? The one you feed, 2 wolves or whatever. And the monster. Is this a
Chinese proverb?
Yeah, the monster you feed is the monster that grows, the monster that lives, and the monster that devours the other one, the one you don't feed. And so I was feeding anger every single morning in the shower. And as long as my showers are, which with every year that goes by and I have less hair to wash, it seems like
oddly enough,
less.
I actually think your showers have gotten longer.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know why.
I mean, I actually get in the shower after you sometimes, and I'm out and like almost dressed when you're like getting out.
Yeah, but no one's really sure about your personal hygiene. Are you actually really washing, correctly? I am.
No doubt.
I don't know if you know that or not, but I am. So anyway, I'm like,
it's like reliving conversations and all of that. Like that's feeding it.
All of it.
Like sitting and meditating on it, repeating the stories over and over again to people. Well, all of those things feed that.
In the shower, I'm literally going through all of these encounters, these confrontations, these meetings that I had sat in, that I had been so like wounded in, that I've been so hurt in. And I'm going through, when he said this, I should have said this. When he did this, I should have got up and walked out. I should have slammed this down on the table. And, and you're replaying it all. And as you're replaying it, you're literally having the same chemical release neurologically that you did in the moment. You're literally like adding anger to anger to anger, and you're making it exponentially worse. So the point is, at the end of the day, I had to begin to resolve this right at the same table where I was feeding it.
Right.
And it took me a month. And every morning in the shower, I would get in, and instead of replaying that, I had to exercise a little discipline, but I had to intentionally redirect my mind and say, in the name of Jesus, I come against anger right now. In the name of Jesus, I'm not going to give this thing I'm not going to give you any more foothold in my life.
And this is where like the self-control part comes in, the self-discipline. It's like,
and I would plead the blood of Jesus over those emotions, over those thoughts, over those memories. And man, am I, at the end of a month, it took a month of showers. And at the end of a month, I was a different person.
Right.
And I honestly can say I've never retold the story again where I had that same that thing building up in me.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, but that's like the promise of being transformed by the renewing of your mind, and you having to do the hard work of renewing your mind and be intentional to it, and not let that anger thing grow within you, because it's going to come out somewhere. It's either going to come out through an explosion, or it's going to come out physically in you and emotionally and spiritually within you, or it's going to come out as like a slow toxic seep out of you
Right.
or on those around you. We didn't even get into that one, but
Well,
I know we're already getting long.
before we let everybody go, why don't we talk about that one? Because I think that's good. I think that's a reality for a lot of folks.
I think the majority of people who feel like they have it together the most, especially Christians, I would say that this is the most prominent one because it can kind of go under the radar and it's more strategic and...
Like, explain that. What do you mean by more strategic?
I think it's like the feeling of needing vindication. I think we want to, like, when we're angry about something or hurt or frustrated or mad about something, we might be like, I'm not angry. Like, I'm totally fine. Like, I didn't blow up at that person. I can have a normal conversation with them. I'm totally fine with them. We have that. Or we're like, okay, the stuffer is like, okay, I'm going to barely converse with them. I'm just going to, like, bottle this all up and never address it. And the other one, that middle ground, is the one that's satisfied. There's something satisfying within us in our, like, flesh that is appeased by hurting others or being able to vindicate ourselves. A lot of times we feel like, it's like a fleshly thing to kind of like want payback or want, I don't know, what's the word for it? Like an eye for an eye, like the eye for eye, justice. Like we want justice. In order to do that, like we take it into our own hands. And instead of saying the Lord vindicates the righteous, we say, I vindicate the righteous. And all of a sudden you're vindicating somebody who's not righteous.
Right.
You're vindicating like the flesh within you. And that's gross.
Yeah. And that's not always, you don't always have to associate that with anger. That's kind of wrong either way. That's
totally. But I'm thinking about the way we have, when we're frustrated, when we have anger, like the different ways that it exposes itself.
Well, it's kind of like the Robin Hood thing where you validate your sin because of somebody else's. Like you're vying for the underdog. So it's like, well, no matter what we do, if we're giving to the poor, it doesn't matter that we're stealing from the rich.
And a lot of times we label it righteous anger.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, okay, is it righteous anger?
Because even if I'm angry on behalf of someone, I'm still angry against someone else.
Against someone.
And that's what's not okay.
Right.
So
anyway, I know that's just a quick little glimpse into
that's
that.
Good,
but
though. That's good.
I'm hitting all those things. But anyway, we will be back here next Friday.
Yeah. Lord, help us.
Lord, help us all.
Jesus Christ, help us. Help us, God. I pray that anybody out there listening who would be real enough or transparent enough to say this is something they deal with, God, I pray that they would hold that thing up to you, Lord, and just allow you to speak to it, God, address it in their lives, convict and confront, Lord, because that's how we become more like you. And so, God, I just pray that even for those of us who maybe are in denial, maybe saying, no, this isn't an issue, or this is just my heritage, this is just how my family is. God, I pray if there's something you want to break off of us or pull out of us, God, to make us, Lord, just better able and equipped to walk the destiny you've called us to. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to seek that out, God, that healing and that restoration. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, Our House, friends and family, we'll see you next Friday on Our House.
This is Messer. And I'm Willa. This is Our House from A to Z. Thanks for coming over.
Mother.
It's a rite of passage.
Mother, I crave violence.
Down.